Stories making headlines this hour. In the most significant sign to Korea's mending ties, South Korean workers head back north to restart factories at the Inner Korean Industrial Zone, shuttered by the communist state 5 months ago. The President Park Geun-hye makes an unprecedented visit to Parliament for talks with the leaders of rival parties in an effort to break a months-long political impasse centering around the nation's spy agency. We have the details. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers, who was considered the leading candidate to become the next chief of the Federal Reserve, withdraws his name from consideration, sending the dollars lower and stocks higher in Asia. Well, these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Monday, September 16th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Now, in the recent sign that North Korea may be trying to improve relations with the South, the Inner Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex resumed operations on this Monday, 5 months after being closed.
But companies still face several hurdles to get their businesses back on track. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports from the transit office at the Inter-Korean border.
165 days. That's how long the Kaesong Industrial Complex has been sitting idle. But Monday marked a new start for the two Koreas, as over 800 South Korean industrial workers went to Kaesong to reboot their machines and get back to work. The South Koreans said that most of the North Korean workers who were there before the suspension were back at their positions on Monday. One executive said he also noticed a positive change.
Most importantly, there has been a change in attitude from the North. I believe the complex will become the backbone for enhancing inter-Korean economic cooperation in the future.
Around 60% of the 123 South Korean firms were in Kaesong and got back to work on Monday. But the road to normal operation looks like it'll be a rocky one.
Since the factory Park has been closed for over 5 months, the firms are lacking orders from buyers. It'll probably take more than a year to reach normalization.
To minimize losses, South Korean firms in Kaesong need to attract old and new buyers in order to operate at full capacity. Meanwhile, the Export-Import Bank of Korea is pressuring firms to return money they'd taken from the Inter-Korean Economic Cooperation Insurance Fund, which was set up to help the companies keep ticking during the shutdown. 46 firms took roughly $140 million from the fund, but paying it back could be difficult, especially considering they haven't made any sales for over 5 months. In response to these concerns, the Kaesong Emergency Committee will ask the government to extend the payback date, currently set for October 15th. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Haju.
And preparations for the upcoming reunions of families separated by the Korean War are also well underway. At the Truth Village of Panmunjom on Monday morning, Red Cross officials from the two Koreas exchanged the final list of names of those selected to participate in the event. The Seoul's Unification Ministry said that 96 South Koreans and 100 from the North will take part in the reunions that are slated to start next Wednesday for 6 days at the Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea. This is the first time in 3 years that Seoul and Pyongyang will host such an event after the reunions were halted due to strained inter-Korean relations. With seemingly warmer ties on the peninsula, the Koreas reopened the shuttered Kaesong Industrial Complex today and made progress on next week's family reunions. But does the recent headway mean North Korea really has had a change of heart?
To discuss whether it looks like we are truly at a turning point in inter-Korean relations, we are joined by Dr. Kim Cheol-woo, Senior Research Fellow at the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Great to be here.
Well, we had a lot of major progress, Professor, on the Kaesong Industrial Complex before it may have been really applauded for the fact that it reopened, but now we may have real internationalization of the complex, more legal rights for the workers, all things that North Korea compromised on in South Korea's favor. Do you think North Korea really has had a change of heart?
I'd like to use kind of a new analogy to describe this situation. A blinking green light, not a blinking yellow light instead. So I think instead of total and wholeheartedly change of their mindset, I don't think so. The North Koreans' sense of urgency is enormous. They have to get out of this kind of quagmire. North Koreans are trying to use this blinking time duration. We all, international community, particularly Western media, should use this as a strategy of encouragement instead of pinpointing, blaming North Korea's dual stance, whatever. And I think that we must be smart at this point.
And speaking of that green light, we're almost near finalizing the family reunions and also the talks. If the talks go well on Mount Kumgang Resort, then many may, pinpoint this as an accomplishment, as a new path for better inter-Korean relations. So wouldn't that just put us back where we started?
So the upcoming new hurdle is family reunion is an emotion bomb to the Korean public. But the point is that all stuff is not fresh new start. All thing is resumption of reunion and Kaesong and all the projects. Something two new things coming up is the DMG, Peace Park initiated by the President Park Geun-hye. So I think the Mount Kumgang Resort is the second hurdle we have to get over. So at this point, the critical keyword is not the speed, but the trust. Trust comes from the actions. Meaningful actions and credible actions. Actions are messages.
Well, Seoul took a hardline, trust-building stance with Kaesong and was able to get more safeguards and securities for the complex. If Seoul were to take a similar approach to Mount Kumgang, what would that look like?
So I think the North Koreans, as we know, perceive the kind of nuclear weapon as a regime survivor or regime guarantor. So even Mount Kumgang project is not directly related to the regime survival strategy. They think the beneficial to their regime survival strategy. So Park Geun-hye's government is very step-by-step principle-based approach. Although it will take longer than expected, or bumpy roads ahead, it doesn't matter. As long as we achieve to this, mutually beneficial strategic goals, it's okay.
You mentioned that we should tame them and encourage their good behavior, but recent satellite imagery last month reportedly shows smoke steam coming out of North Korea's nuclear reactor in Yongbyon. Now, why would they do that at such a critical moment in inter-Korean relations?
At this point, interestingly, North Korean authority has not yet confirmed officially or made a public announcement of their bragging about their restarting. We should encourage, again, North Korea to rethink their so-called weapon state strategy. That's a wrong choice, strategic mistake.
Well, speaking of the weapon state strategy, do you think that the recent events in Syria are going to embolden the Pyongyang regime to continue along with its nuclear weapons program?
North Koreans are not dumb, guy. They are kind of sly fox. How to maneuver at this juncture. It depends on the North Korea's strategic maneuvering. But Syrian case is putting too much weight on that is an unacceptable thing to buy.
All right, Dr. Kim, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report. Less than
unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Came on the news are trying to cover up the South's true intentions.
And now to efforts from the nation's top office to resolve the prolonged political impasse at the National Assembly. President Park Geun-hye met with the leaders of the two main political parties on Monday with hopes of walking away with a solution.
But she and the opposition Democratic Party failed to reach agreement on how to break the gridlock surrounding the issue of reforming the nation's spy agency. Kim Hyun-ji reports from the National Assembly.
After the landmark talks with President Park Monday afternoon, the ruling and the main opposition parties had very different perspectives about the meeting. According to the ruling Saenuri Party's chief secretary, Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil proposed tough reforms of the nation's spy agency, led by the National Assembly. But President Park said the National Intelligence Service is in the process of drawing up rigorous plans for its own reforms, and that lawmakers can make changes once this plan is filed at the National Assembly. President Park and the ruling party were also lukewarm about the opposition party's proposal to form a special parliamentary committee to reform the spy agency, because doing so would override the function of the parliament's intelligence committee. At the talks, Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil asked President Park to offer a public apology for the spy agency's interference in last year's presidential election. But she rejected the suggestion, saying that the scandal began and ended during the Lee Myung-bak administration. Regarding Prosecutor General Choi Dong-uk's sudden resignation last Friday, President Park rejected the notion that the presidential office pulled strings to take him down. The unsatisfied Democratic Party says it will continue its street protest campaign, which has been going on for more than a month now. Vast bipartisan differences over the spy agency scandal have paralyzed parliamentary business for weeks, putting on the back burner urgent issues like next year's budget. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
Turning now to Japan's efforts to remove Korea's import ban on its fisheries products. Tokyo officials visited Seoul on this Monday to protest the recent boycott. But the move seemed to do little to assuage fears of radiation contamination. Yu Lian reports on the lingering worries from the government and the public.
A group of 9 officials from Japan's Fisheries Ministry visited Korea's food watchdog on Monday afternoon to discuss Korea's recent import ban on all fisheries products from Japan's radiation-hit Fukushima and 7 other nearby prefectures. The officials from Japan's Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries reportedly explained to their Korean counterparts the countermeasures that have been taken against radiation leaks and asked that the ban be lifted. The Korean government in return asked for more detailed information on the radiation leak out of Fukushima, saying that what they have been provided thus far is not sufficient enough to determine whether imports from those regions are safe from radiation. Japan's chief cabinet secretary earlier this month tried to reassure the international community about the safety of Japanese products.
After the nuclear crisis, all products have been subject to intense checkups to meet international safety standards.
The Korean government, however, has been emphasizing that the ban was necessary, as there are escalating concerns about whether fish from Japan are safe to consume.
We enforce the ban as information, and data from the Japanese government is not enough to determine the exact situation after the nuclear accident.
If Korea decides to leave the import ban as it is, Japan's Sankei Shimbun says Japan may file a legal suit against Korea with the WTO. Following Monday's meeting, the Korean government is expected to meet with related departments to discuss what their next move will be. Yu Lian, Arirang News.
On the country's economic front, recent data may indicate a steady recovery, but growth so far has largely been limited to exporters. That means many Korean consumers are feeling left out from any of the gains. Arirang's Hwang Ji-hye has the details on the stagnant growth outlook.
From GDP growth and trade surplus to low inflation and improving spending power, recent economic indicators released by the government point to a rosy future for the Korean economy. But there's few signs benefits of the improving conditions are felt by ordinary Koreans. That's because the recovery so far has largely been driven by export-reliant companies, and corporate earnings have not trickled down to workers, at least as yet. While national income grew 4.7% in the second quarter of this year from a year earlier, the income improvement for households for the comparing period was less than a third of the pace. That is well below the rate of the nation's GDP expansion of 2.3%. The nation also logged nearly $5 billion in trade surplus last month to stay in the black for the 19th straight month, thanks to improving exports that went up over 7% in the month from the same period last year. In contrast, Korea's private spending, a main traditional growth engine together with exports and investment, grew a mere 1.8% in the second quarter of this year from the same period last year. Experts don't expect the private sector to regain vitality in the coming months.
The nation's household debt problem and the slumping real estate market is causing people to cut down on their spending. That means the lackluster activity of the private sector is likely to continue for some time to come.
Experts say to make consumers start spending, again, the government should find ways to revive the housing market and create quality jobs. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
A former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers has withdrawn from the race to be the Federal Reserve's next chief, suggesting a more gradual approach to tightening monetary policy. His surprise decision sent the U.S. dollar lower and share prices upward. Kim Young-gil reports.
Larry Summers has pulled out of the contest to succeed Ben Bernanke as the chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve. After the White House confirmed President Obama accepted the decision by the former Treasury Secretary on Sunday, the U.S. dollar weakened and stocks and bonds rallied in Asia on hopes that Bernanke's successor, unlike Summers, will slowly wind down Fed's easy monetary policies. Summers' withdrawal strengthens the chance for current Fed chairwoman Janet Yellen, the other leading candidate to replace Bernanke. She is believed to be less inclined to quickly reverse quantitative easing, which might rattle the global markets. Such cautious approach in reducing large-scale asset purchases will have a positive effect on the emerging markets, given that investors had left the market in fear of quick withdrawal of the stimulus. Summers' surprise decision came shortly before Fed policymakers meet on Tuesday and Wednesday to decide the timing and extent of dialing back the central bank's monthly government bond purchases from the current pace of $85 billion. The purchases are aimed at holding down long-term interest rates, thus increasing borrowing and investing in order to create more jobs and lower unemployment. Despite the assurances that the stimulus would be withdrawn gradually and that interest rates will not be raised anytime soon, investors are still uneasy. If yields shoot higher even after this week's Fed meeting, confidence could be hit and the already feeble U.S. recovery could stumble, while investors in emerging markets could further head for the exit. The Fed each month buys $45 billion in Treasury bonds and $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities, and the U.S. monetary policy largely determines global capital flow. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And to the latest in Syria now that a diplomatic breakthrough has been reached over the country's chemical arsenal, the Syrian regime has until the middle of 2014 to hand over all their chemical weapons. But as Kanye Lee reports, there is looming doubt about whether the country can meet the deadline.
The Syrian government declared victory for its country over the recent chemical weapons deal. A Syrian minister told a Russian news network that the deal helped the country avert U.S. military action and thanked Russia's diplomacy for making the deal happen. The U.S. and Russia agreed on Saturday to bring Syria's chemical weapons under international control and destroy it all by the middle of next year. Under the deal, Syria has 1 week to declare what it has. And by November, inspectors will start arriving in the country to destroy or remove the weapons. Although the new deal postpones U.S. strikes on Syria, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, speaking in Israel, said military action was still a possibility.
Diplomacy has always been the preferred path of the President of the United States, and I think is any peace-loving nation's preferred choice. But make no mistake, we've taken no options off the table.
Meanwhile, a former UN inspector on chemical weapons has expressed doubts that Syria will meet the target date in destroying all of its chemical arms.
The timeline mid-2014 that the destruction has been completed by mid-2014 will be a huge challenge, and I think technically it probably will not be possible to complete by mid-2014.
Experts believe that Syria has 1,000 tons of deadly chemical weapons spread across about 50 cities. A UN report on the use of chemical weapons in Syria's civil war is set to be released on Monday. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
As you may very well know, all able-bodied Korean men are required to serve in the military here.
And it just got a bit more difficult for athletes to become exempt from compulsory service due to the establishment of a medal point system. Stephen Che joins us from the Sports Center to tell us exactly how it works. Stephen.
Hey guys, the medal point system set up by the Military Manpower Administration designates point totals for medals earned, with 100 points being the cutoff. That means that athletes must win at least a silver medal in the Olympics or win several medals adding up to 100, including those earned at the Asian Games, to avoid the draft. Previously, athletes were only required to earn any medal in either competition. In addition, points for medals at world competitions that take place every year, 2 to 3 years and 4 years, have also been designated. And moving on, the LA Dodgers and their lefty Lee Hyun-jin will take a road trip to Arizona to take on the Diamondbacks at Chase Field on Monday evening. For Ryu, it's the second time in as many outings that he's facing the D-backs. Last time, he had to chalk up the loss. In order to rack up his 14th win, he has to shore up his control and avoid giving up easy hits. Most importantly, the Dodgers' bats must come alive and provide run support if they want to get out of their 3-game slump. And sliding home, it's time to talk about Monday's top KBO matchup. The Nexen Heroes and the NC Dinos faced off in Masan. The Heroes hold on to the last playoff spot, the Dinos hanging on. Now we go to the first. NC's Na Sung-bum's sac fly to left scores the runner, 1-0 Dinos. Then we go to the third. Nexen's Kim Min-sung doubles. Park Byung-ho speeds home from first, scores level 1-1. Now we go to the next inning. The Heroes, Lee Sung-yeol, he hits this solo blast down to left. Nexen leads by 1. Then in the 7th, Lee Tae-keun hits another in, and the Heroes go on to win this one with a final score of 3-1. And looking at the matchup between Kia and Hanwha, the Hanwha Eagles take this one with a final score of 9-6. That does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Now let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, it was a very sunny start to the week here in Seoul.
Yes, it was, and Tuesday should hold more of the same for most of the nation.
Now, the question everyone will want to answer, though, is will this picture-perfect weather last through the Chuseok holiday?
Well, Ji-hye, as of now, yes. It looks like we'll have beautiful weather conditions for the rest of this week. For details, let's take a look at the satellite map. The nation is under the influence of a high-pressure front from the West Sea. This is why we're seeing clear skies throughout the nation. Tomorrow, we should enjoy another day of this clear autumn weather. In fact, it should be perfect for you to soak up some sun during the afternoon. afternoon. The average daytime highs around the nation should hit 30 degrees with a low of 14. As the big temperature gap between the days and nights should continue, please remember to grab a cardigan before you head out. Now, taking a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, it looks like it's going to be a sunny day tomorrow. Seoul, Daegu, Gwangju, and Busan should all make it to 30 degrees. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju should hit the high 20s. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Kumgang should peak at 26 and 18 degrees respectively. Well, have a wonderful evening. That's all I have for you this hour, but join me for another update after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Monday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.